Hello, everyone. This is Joe Armstrong, and we're just waiting for a minute before we get started. Got a lot of people joining right here at the top of the hour, so we'll give them a minute. Otherwise, we're all pretty much set. All right, stick that up here. And everybody should be able to see right now Bob's chart, his beginning chart up there. So, Bob, any big, while we're waiting, big 30-year celebrations that are yet to come?
Well, the actual date I think is isn't it June? Isn't it like tomorrow? The actual
June 22nd. Yeah.
I think so. I'm looking on my wall because I actually used to have something on my wall that actually said the actual launch date of this. But no, they've been going on. I know they had a cake in European Common that looked like one of the old B10s. And they've got a lot of things going on. I know there's a new offering for customers that are doing the P05, the 30-year thing. I think it gives them some cloud capabilities to use and saves them a little bit of money if they want to do that in the short term and long term. So I think a lot of good things. Good. IBMI is live and well.
Yes, it is. Okay. So we're a couple minutes late, so let's go ahead and get started. Again, welcome everyone. I'm Joe Armstrong. This is the Power Systems Virtual User Group webinar for June. I hope you're having a great summer. Happy first day of summer to you all. Love this day, the longest day of the year. So we're going to go ahead and get started with today. We have a topic that's really an IBMI specific topic. We've been started doing that last month, and I'm going to throw probably not one every month, but I'm going to try and throw a few of these in over the year to just cover some IBMI specific stuff. There's been considerable demand for that. So this is the second one, and it's really kind of geared for some new stuff that's coming out, beginning, I guess, a little bit bigger deal in Power 9, since we don't have an integrated DVD player in the Power 9 systems now. So the USB ports have becoming more popular, and they're a great alternative, faster and better reliability and such with the USB, but they're also a little bit different than other operating systems like Linux and AIX usage of the USB ports. So today, Bob Schuster is going to join us. We'll kick this as part of a celebration of 30 years of IBMI, and as Bob said, it's going strong. So Bob's going to help us with this. Bob's been with IBM for over 30 years now, working primarily, at least mostly lately, with IBMI. And Bob's one of these guys that when this new kind of technology stuff comes out, he really tackles it and figures out how it works and kind of spreads the word. Bob's with what we call now the Washington Systems Center, a group of people that have specific deep knowledge in different areas of the system. And so Bob's got a lot of deep knowledge, and I'm lucky that he's in Rochester, Minnesota with me, so I get to lean on Bob for lots of different things. So with that, Bob, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
All right, thanks, Joe. And welcome, everybody. Good morning, good evening, good day. It's another rainy day here in Minnesota. I think we kind of went from winter to 90 degrees, and now the last month is been kind of wet. But my goal for today is to go over primarily to talk about using USB capability for IBMI. And I'm going to show you a new tool that's been created for this. And I've got many screens up, and I'm going to try and do some live demos. But what I did when I put this presentation together, I actually did this for a couple of conferences. The IBM Technical Conference, that happened in Florida, I guess a couple months ago, and then the Common User Group event, now named Power Up 18. And so there was a lot of interest with this because if you haven't heard, when you order your Power Box today, there is no longer an integrated DVD. And sometimes that panics a lot of customers, especially IBM customers, but not to worry. If you really want a CD-ROM, we do offer a USB attachable CD-ROM, but I'm hoping that after this presentation, you might reconsider and say, hey, I want to use a USB flash key instead. And we put together some really nice tools to help you use USB. Some people might say, well, was it that hard to continue to use a DVD, et cetera? Well, the reality of it is the market is really changing, and DVDs and CD-ROM players are becoming harder and harder to get in devices. You may not see that quite yet in the desktop environment or whatever, but in the laptop environment, the last two laptops I've got did not come with a CD-ROM. And one of our suppliers that used to supply them for IBM for our systems just said they're just not viable and we need to look to other things. And their suggestion and many others were, well, we need to change to USB flash drives and or USB attached DVDs drives. And so we'll talk about that as we move forward. And you know, USB attachments in the past, people thought they were expensive, but really the new thumb drives, you know, you can get a 128 gig or a 256 gig key for under $100. They're very reliable. Yes, I can tell you over the years I've gotten free keys that shows, and I'll tell you, you do get what you pay for in some of these keys. So I would tell you, when you do this, buy yourself some good USB 3-level keys, probably in the 64 gig or 128 gig, depending on how much data and installation media you want to put on. But we'll talk about that as we go forward. I do want to go back to this chart. Jim Tilbury, who's retiring, he's been with IBM over 40 years. He's the one that really spearheaded this a few years ago and said, we are going to do this. And I'm glad he did, because it really helped us transition into the Power 9. The other thing for IBM customers, the default has always been, if you did a D-mode IPL, it would always default to SAS or the SATA CD DVD ROM. It would always go, it could always find that. Moving forward in Power 9, the default is now USB. So the latest TR releases for 7.2 and 7.3, when you load those, which are required for Power 9, they are enabled to look for USB as the default. Now, that doesn't mean it won't work on other environments. It'll still look for that. If you have a Power 8 or Power 7 type box, for say, nothing will change. Now, a couple other things. So the USB stuff that I'm going to talk about today is really aimed at Power 9. So I get some questions from customers. Okay, can I plug this USB key into a Power 8 box and make it do a D-mode IPL? The answer is yes, with a caveat in that I need an HMC to target and tell it that I'm going to boot from a USB. Because remember, it's going to default to the DVD that's already in the box. So if you don't have an HMC and you're on a Power 7 or Power 8 box, you still need to boot your licensed internal code from the CD image, and then you can transfer over to the USB key. I hope that makes sense. In Power 9, you can do everything from the USB key. Okay. So a couple other things that we also added was optical container support. And I'll talk a little bit about this. This is really more for RDX drives, or what we call RMS devices, or removable mass media. So when you see these devices, and this is where I want to do a little bit of a demoing here. Oops. As soon as I get it to grab my screen here. Now, hopefully you can, Joe, can you see the screen?
Yeah, we can see that.
Okay, everybody smiled now because this is God's gift to a GUI, a green screen. So if I do an asterisk device and I say RMS, these are my two different devices. Now, in my box, I have both an RDX and I've got a USB key plugged in. And so, you know, if I went in here, I could go down and look, and I believe the RMS one in here is my RDX, and the RMS 2 is my USB key. Really doesn't matter.
How would you know which one is which, Bob?
The type, and I've got that in my presentation, and I'll be honest, that's one of the ones I haven't memorized yet, but I believe that's what it is. And the other thing to keep in mind with the RDX, or with the USB, and hopefully that screen stays up. I've got many things on my different screens, because what I want to show you is, I'm going to get on a Power 9 box here in a minute, as soon as it comes back here. Well, I'll let that load in the background. Our network's been kind of goofy here this week, Joe. So, and I'll show you which one is which based on the type. But a couple of things to keep in mind with the container thing is, I don't know if any of you have ever purchased a RDX drive, but you can use that RDX drive in a couple of ways. A container to have multiple backups, or you can tell it, I want to do a massive container, and it will be used for a full option 21 save that can span multiple RDX medias. The other thing, and this is what we're going to talk about the most today, is the tool that we started to create for the USB key. Now, we made this available back in TR7 and TR3. Those are not the TRs that support Power 9. They're going to be TR4 and TR8, if memory serves me correctly. There's going to be another TR as our scale-up systems come out later in the year as well, the 950 and the 980, and IBM I supporting that. But what you'll find is, if you go out to the ESS and do your main downloads, you will now see that there's another image right here, this USB IMG. This is what we're going to use in conjunction with this tool that's available to download as well. And I'm going to show you that in just a minute. So here's a couple of examples of looking at a installation where I created a container. And one of the things that happens now in these later versions of LIC code is, when it sees these RMS devices like a flash drive, a DVD, or a RDX drive, if it's been formatted as a container and you plug it in, it will automatically create you this OpVRT01 and populate it with the information that's on the device, versus you as the customer no longer have to go in and add entries to the image catalog, which is going to be one of the things that you're definitely going to like. So a couple of things to keep in mind on the RMS is, allows you to take your images and put them on flash and automatically creates the image catalog for you. And what you're going to find is this is very similar to if you've done image catalogs on IBM I, which I've done for many, many years. This is actually going to be much simpler. Now, there's a link on the presentation, and Joe has these. I don't know if he'll put them out in PowerPoint or a PDF or both. I really don't care. But you should be able to click on that link, and there's a lot of good information in Knowledge Center in DeveloperWorks for this. So here's some of the information you would get. And a couple of things to keep in mind is we support USB 3 keys, and a while back we added a PTF into our operating system so we could go beyond 32 gig. Now, a lot of times I get questions by customers that, hey, does this tool work for AIX and Linux? The answer is absolutely no. It's set up to initialize the flash drive so it can do a D-mode IPL for IBM I only. Now, I'm trying to get the developers to take the same GUI code and allow it to take other ISOs and create the a bootable flash drive for you as well. For example, to, let's say, reload a HMC or something else. And that's work in progress, okay? So here's another screen of the work image catalog of a particular device. Tells you which one's mounted, a save sys, B group, etc. And, you know, here's some differences between your traditional container versus your traditional image catalog. But what I really want to get to is the information on the particular tool that we've just created and announced. So what does it look like? So if I go to the wiki, and it tells me to go download the information, etc. So I'm basically cutting and pasting what's really on the web. So I would tell you that 2 months from now, this presentation could be out of date because they went and updated this with maybe a later version of the jar file they use. So yes, you do need Java on the PC. It does work for Windows and Apple OS. It does not work for Linux because they don't have the file system type that we need to support this. So here's what it looks like after you create the tool. And I'm just taking this off of the website. Notice up on the right-hand side, there was some PTFs. If you were going to do this in non-Power 9 environment, just make sure you've got those PTFs installed in 7.2 and 7.3 so you can use, it'll recognize a greater than 32 gig key. Here's some information on the tool, the README file. I'm just going to jump through this. But basically, if I would go up to the ESS download site, and I would say, give me the 7.3 code, and I would select down on the bottom, I want the 7.3 code. This is some of the stuff I'd see. So here's my USB flash image and the code to do that. So I would say, I want to go ahead and download that. And here's my whole list of stuff I'm going to do and download. And right here is the image file for 7.3. And further up here is the code for the tool to actually create it. And so here's all my files that I downloaded. There's my groups. And here's what it would look like for 7.2. Basically the same. The biggest difference will be the name of the file. And also it's going to download this zip file with the jar code. So what you do is you explode that zip file, and that's what I'm going to do here now. So here's my directory of 7.3, and here's all my images, and here's that tool that I've exploded. So in the previous releases of this, when we first did it, was a command line. Well, they decided, well, that was too much work. So they created a new GUI. And when the GUI comes up, it actually shows you a little GUI environment. So it says, what image do I want? So I'll say browse, and I'm going to go back to this image here. And I'm going to go to my IBM v7r3 directory, and there's the 7.3 image. I was playing with this early on, and I changed the name. And now, one thing to keep in mind, notice how it's referencing the drive by the drive number. I know I only have one USB key in here, but if you had multiple, you might want to go into disk part or go into your disk partitions and find what is the disk number. Because when I say create this, it's going to give you one warning. I'm going to blast the drive. Well, I know that's my store and go USB drive. And when I say yes, it's going to go ahead and create the code or format the USB key in the proper format so I can actually boot this in a D-mode IPL. Now you might say, could I do this, initialize this from IBM I? Absolutely. You would initialize this USB key as a container and it would basically do the same thing. I would tell you this tool is very nice and I would recommend you create it on your desktop. So that's going to run in the background. And so I'm going to move these things out of the way. Oops. And so here was the old way. They did it with a command line. And so you can see, yeah, I can still do a command line, but I don't know about you. To me, that's messy versus now the new way, which is a really nice interface. And so when it gets done, you'll get a copy complete. And I'm trying to figure out where my actual command went. It's running here someplace in the background. Oh, there it is. It's 70% done. And when it gets done, you're going to see a key like this, and it's going to take a few more seconds. I actually want to show you on the key itself. And then the next question is, well, what else can I put on that key? Well, if you remember what's in my folder, now I've got a bunch of ISOs. I've got some UDF files. And sorry, I had a ding on my code. Hold on, Joe, I got to go into do not disturb mode. Sorry. When this key gets done, so now the key is done. So let's switch to that key. And I'll go over to my F drive. So here's all the information. So there's my F drive, and there's my images. So now how do I get my B group stuff, for example? You just drag and drop it. Now, I did the ultimate test for development, and as you can see, I have every ISO known to man, plus CUMEs, and back in several months ago, I told it to go get me all the groups besides the CUME, and so it gives you a list of a bunch of bin files. What do I do with those? Well, if I want, I just drag them. Doesn't matter the order, because when you plug this key in, the code is smart enough to know how to mount that and automatically let you use it without you doing anything. Yes, this is going to take a little bit of time to create this key, but what I've found is I can fit everything I need on a 128 gig key. And so why is that important is when I get done, I've got a massive key here that's got absolutely everything on it. And so when I do my D-mode IPL, I never have to change my media. The only thing I have to do is know, is it going to be OpVert 01 or OpVert 02 when I go to a Go license program? Up until that point, it's going to know automatically where that information is on a D-mode IPL on a Power 9, or if I'm on a Power 8 or Power 7 system, notice here I have to tell where my alternate resource device is if I'm in an HMC managed environment. Hopefully that makes sense. Now I'm going to take just a second. Is there any questions?
So let's see, Bob. There were a couple of questions that were early on.
Yep.
One was when you were looking at the media types, or you're looking at what you had out there. Somebody was, would you be able to see the media type with the WRK DWRSC star STG command?
Well, let's go look. And basically, this is going to show you the RMS 01 and 02. And I believe the C1 is actually the USB key, and the one that ends in 8 is actually the RDX device.
Okay.
And so the other question I'm seeing out here, the upper limit is 2 terabytes, right? The answer to that question is yes. Currently, the RDX drive size limit is 2 terabytes. Will that change someday? Yes. How soon, I don't know. How large of a USB key can we support? I've heard they're going to go terabytes as well, so I'm assuming that it's going to be just about kind of go lockstep. And if there is any increase in size in USB keys, I'm assuming they're going to do some testing as well. But I don't know why you would potentially want to do a backup to a USB key, which would lend itself to why would you want to do that versus going to an RDX. Because I will tell you, unless you buy very more expensive keys, they potentially do wear out if you do a lot of writes to them. I see a lot of questions coming now.
Yeah. So can you use this for PTF loads?
Yes, you can as well, and I'll show you that.
Okay.
And the download of the tool is you get the tool from ESS. So you have to be authorized to download your license internal code, and then it comes part of that. The USB key does replace the iBase DVD. So when you buy that image, when you download the image and you create the key, that now becomes your bootable iBase 01, which we had called it in the past. Yes, there's still a UDF file that can be used to create a bootable CD-ROM. I would not put that on this USB key because you don't need it. Okay, and let's see, upgrading from 7.1, planning upgrade. Is there enough support for 7.1 to upgrade to USB? I'm not 100% sure on that. All the testing and stuff was done on the USB key. If the code, it's really going to be the code on the USB key. So if you did a 7.3 image, I believe it will work. Because you're in a Power 8, you're going to need either to boot from a DVD in V7R3 and then switch to the USB, or tag it with an HMC. Can you purchase the LIC and OS media on USB? Not at this point. I don't know that they're planning to do that.
I do not think we're planning to do that.
You know, and somebody's saying the difference between USB and RDX. So USB is the connection mechanism, just And then the RDX is one of the units that we plug into the USB key or the USB port, just like the flash drive plugs into the USB port. Hopefully that answers the question. Okay. All right, let's go a little bit ahead now. And so I took this was an HMC managed machine. So once an HMC is involved, you do have to tag where it's going to boot. I don't care what release of power you've got, because the HMC changes, he's in full control. So I did a demode IPL, plug in my key. After several minutes, it'll come up, and the first thing it'll say is, give me the 2924. The next step is I confirm it, do an install license code. In this case, I had 6 drives. I always pick the bottom one just because that's where I am. Confirm it, install the license code, and initialize the system. Depending on if those are physical or virtual disks, will determine how long it will take before it actually gets to the point to initialize the disk and when it actually does the install license code. So this is all being done for my USB key. It also could be done if you set up an RDX drive as well, or I guess if you really loved your DVD and you plugged in a USB CD-ROM, yes, that would still work, but my goal is to hopefully convince you to do USB, okay, and the flash. So I find my disk configuration. I say 10, go ahead. I say perform IPL, tell it to add the disks and go. It starts adding all the disks to the ASP. And you're going to say, you'll get the screen that says, hey, I need to install the BOSS code or the license and kernel code. I get to the old, hey, your password's expired. I say perform an IPL. You may not do your steps identical to the way I'm doing mine. You could do option 1 or option 2 here. I know if I do option 1, it'll figure out what I want to do. It's going to start going through the install the operating system. It's going to ask you what you want to do. And it's going to automatically move to the B group because I copied all the B groups to it. And it's going to do that automatically without you having to do anything. If I was doing this from an image catalog or disks hosted by VIOS, depending on how you set up the image catalog, it may or may not automatically go to the next one. I know in BIOS you have to unload and mount the next image. With the USB key, it just does it on its own. So I go through here, I get my configuration done, I accept my software agreements, and now I'm at the initial where, okay, I've got license and kernel code, I've got the BOSS part of the OS that brings me up to where I'm going to install all my LPPs. That's where I'm going to go look at my OpVert 01. And what you're going to see is when I do that, you're going to see OpVert 01. When I did this installation, it was tied back to the device RMS 01. And that's got a volume right here of IBase of USB. That's what we name the key when we format it. And here's a picture of my F drive. So that by default, that's what we call it. Yes, you could rename it later if you really wanted to. And what you would see down here, I've got my B group being copied. I've got my bin file for my PTFs. Obviously, if I was to create and copy everything, it would take quite a while. But so I'm going to go through and notice that the last thing it had done on OpVert 01, it had done B group _01. And so it had moved to the B group from the license internal code. So when I say go license program here, The only thing I need to do is say op VRT01, which automatically was set up when I plugged that USB key in. And I'm going to tell it to absolutely install everything. And I didn't do the screen, but after an hour or whatever, it got done. And then I was on an HMC, and to save myself time, I actually told the HMC, hey, go turn me into a B normal IPL. And then I told it to do, okay, go back to OP01. Now I'm going to do go PTFs. And because I've got all my PTF volumes on it, and he's just going to start to do, and notice it's loading from, on this one, volume 25 and volume 26. It's automatically advancing as it needs it. And what you're going to find is my cumes are in there. And our operating system knows how to handle this. So in one IPL, I'm going to get everything done. And when this thing comes up, I'm going to be in a B normal with the groups, all my PTFs, and all my licensed internal code and licensed products I've purchased all in one foul swoop. And that's why I really like this new scenario. Okay, so what you're going to find is, so on mine I had all these different things, and the last thing it had loaded, notice that, was the second PTF group of the main cume package for V7R3 at that particular point. I think that's still the latest. And it did it all on its own. Okay, now I see there's a lot of questions. So Joe, let's see if we can answer some of these.
Okay, so first of all, Bob, so in the upper left corner, you have the uncheck the show answered questions, so you know which ones are answered. Okay.
Yep. Oh my God. Okay, how does this work for VIO virtualized environment? So if I'm in VIOS, you may not necessarily want to use this, but you could, or you could put your images on the VIOS server. If you wanted to do USB, I would have to give the partition the USB IO, and it would have to own it. So here's my screen here. So if I go to physical adapters, you would have to give, now this is a Power 9, you would have to give this USB port to the system directly. Now, you can actually share the USB ports with a VIOS server, similar to what you would do an optical library, etc. But it doesn't support flash. It only supports RDX. So my suggestion would be just give the USB port to the particular partition. Now, if you want to move it from one LPAR to another, you're going to have to vary off the optical device that it creates and the RMS device before it'll let you release it from one partition to the other. So if I wanted to remove this right now, it would not let me because I know it's varied on. And I would have to both vary off my RDX device, my RMS 01 and 02, and my virtual optical, or my OPT VRT 01 and 02. Would have to all be varied off, or the operating, or the HMC would not allow me to do that. Okay, can this be used to load PTFs? Yes, we can. Do we have to use the image, or can we use the normal base? The image file is used with the tool. The UDF file is used if you want to use an image catalog, or you want to use that to burn a nice CD-ROM. Frank Scott, is there any official listing for supported USB keys? No, but I would tell you, you get what you paid for. Does it auto-create the device regardless of Q auto-config setting? I believe the answer to that question is yes. I never have it off, But if you were doing a D-mode IPL, that would happen automatically. If you were going to plug it in after the operating system's on and had never seen the key, then maybe it would not auto-create the device then. I have not tested that, John. So I'm thinking that it would not create the RMS device if it had never seen the particular flash key. What happens at, say, 7.2 and 7.3 boot images are on the key. When you create this, you're going to use one or the other. So you can only have one image file of either 7.2 or 7.3. Then if you throw 7.2 and 7.3 images onto the DVD, if they're valid for that operating systems, it could potentially load it with a Go license program. The B groups are going to have to match up to whatever the image file was used for either 7.2 or 7.3. If you have a partition that's going to upgrade, does the USB have to be moved from one partition to the other to upgrade? The answer is yes. USB HDD or USB SDD support, I have not tried that. Do I believe it would work? Yes. Is it the intention to do that? No. The two devices that they're testing with this are USB flash drives and the USB RDX drive that you can order with our box, either inside a USB carrier that plugs into the Power 9 or a standalone USB 3 capable RDX drive. Can this be used with BIOS and a shared LPAR? Yes, for the RDX environment, but not the flash environment. So if I wanted to do a D-mode IPL, I'd have to give the flash and the USB port directly to the partition. And I think I already answered this. You really don't want to mix releases. You can't with the LIC code or the image code, but the PTFs potentially. I have not tried throwing, like, let's say a 7.2 QM onto a 7.3 key. I would assume it would mount it, look through it, and would find, hey, I don't need any of this stuff. That's what I'm assuming.
What would happen if you use two different keys? And you put one on one key and one on another key, and you plugged both keys into different USB ports?
Well, it's going to, the system is going to, whichever one answers first. Now,
yeah,
that brings
so
up
you can
a good
pick which
point.
one you want then.
Yeah. That brings up a, well, yes and no. Because if you plug, let's say you plugged, if I'm on a 924 and I plugged a 7.2 key in the front and a 7.3 key in the back, it's going to find the 7.2 key to boot from. Because it's going to find the one in the front first. Why did it find the one in the front first? Because that by default is the one that we're going to look for first, because that has the port that we support doing a D-mode IPL off of the external USB DVD that we sell for $95 or $100.
And let's just say here that let's just say here that if you get the external DVD that plugs into the USB port, it has to plug into the front port.
It has to plug into the front port, and the reason is for power. Right. That's the USB port with the most power. Now you might say, well, I have my own it's got a Y connector. Use at your own risk. Tracy Smith says it the right way. If I'm a customer and it's the end of the week and my system's blown up and I didn't spend $95 on that DVD, and your system goes down and you use some other one that we haven't tested, you would pay whatever to get your system back up. So my point of that is, if you think you're going to want that USB DVD one in your enterprise, order the one from IBM. That's the one we tested, and that's the one we support. Let's see. I think I answered that one. I think I answered the one on going from 7 to 7.3. Yes, you can duplicate the key if you want, or just run the process a second time. There's a dupe-op command, which will do it on the system, or some duplicate command on your PC. Does the USB image completely replace the normal iBase DVD? Yes. It's really one or the other. I talked about the differences between there. In a scenario where we have multiple LPARs with different NLSs, how does the RDX drive work with this? Let's hold that one for a little bit. It's only going to look for a particular B group and the matching NLS ones for the particular national language support. But let's talk about that more when I've got a few charts on partitioning up an RDX drive. Is this drive will be using same bus as the load source? It's not really the same bus because it's really, well, yes and no. It depends on where your disks are, because if you look at this, it's on whatever bus right here, the P1 bus. So it really depends on where I'm installing to. In my case, I'm installing to the internal RAID. So in this case, yes, theoretically it's on the same bus, the P1 bus. But that's going to differ depending on your hardware. What about those of us who manage systems remotely? Will there be a virtual USB? There's no way to really mount a virtual USB from your PC to a other environment. At some point, you got to have the physical code out there, or I guess an HMC with VIOS, and you're managing an HMC remotely out there. I'm not totally sure I understand the question, but at some point we got to have physical media or virtual media that's in a VIOS server in that box, or something within the location there.
How would that differ from if you were using a DVD? You'd have the same
it's
issue,
really
right?
gonna be the same.
Yeah.
So if you put all media present on the USB in a single catalog, yes, it just does that for you. Is it bin or ISO? It's bin, ISO, or UDF. It doesn't matter. They'll figure it out. They support them all. Get copied to the disk, or does it only reside on the image catalog is completely virtual. You don't have to create anything like you normally do, or create a file that has a listing of all the images. It just does it. By doing this, you don't lose the ability to LPM, you have to remember, you don't lose any ability with LPM, but remember that if you have a USB port that is owned by that LPAR, you're going to have to remove it. Just like if you're in VIOS and you mount a virtual optical, if you don't remove that device, it won't let you LPAR or live partition mobility from one partition to the other. Power 9 has multiple USB ports. That is true. Now, there's really, on a 922, there's 2 in the front and 2 in the back that are blue. The ones in the front on the 922, either one of those has power to run a DVD. In a 924, which more IBMI customers are going to do, it's only the port 1 in the front can handle the DVD and have more power. The USB keys can be put in the front or the back, but I will tell you, there's also this thing called the FSP on the back of the power box that has 2 USB ports. Those are owned by the FSP and have nothing to do with this. And I can tell you, if you were to plug a DVD-ROM into it or a USB key, the only thing it's going to look for on that is if you're trying to update the firmware, of your power box is what that's used for in service functions. So hopefully that makes sense on what can be used where. Let's see. I think I'm going to move back to the presentation and then come back to a few questions at the end.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So if I want to use optical containers, now this is where you're typically going to start bringing in the RDX device. So the thing that the RDX device is the ability to do a save sys with it if you want, because it's really there as a direct replacement for some of the old internal LTOs that we used to have, et cetera. Is it going to perform as fast as a fiber attached LTO? No. Will it perform as fast as the SAS attached LTO that used to be in a Power 8 and Power 7 type devices? It's going to get pretty close, but probably not quite as fast because it's running at potentially 6 gigabits on some of those older controllers. But here's where I can initialize a device and I can say I want a container for it. So here's my box here. So here was when I was doing RMS2 in this particular setup when I captured the screens. And I've got like 3 different partitions. So depending on when I move this from one partition to the other, it remembers which one's RMS1 versus RMS01 for the RDX. So I'm going to tell it, if I go back, I can create a container for it. And this is where I can tell it I can create image catalogs physically on the RDX device. If I don't do a container and I let it default, it can be just used as a 2 terabyte save sys device as RMS02. If I tell it to do a container, which I did here, now I can add optical images into it. And there's a nice command called create container volumes, and this is an API. And this command right here, can tell you I want to call this API, and the parameters are basically how many images do I want and what size. And there's many different things. Why would I do this? So if I wanted to create 7 images for, say, Monday or Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and I wanted to mount a different image based on the day I'm going to do a save. Hopefully that makes sense. Now, obviously, when it does, it creates some volumes that don't mean a lot to people, but you can go in here and reinitialize them and actually change the things. I thought I had a screen capture of that. I think it's coming up where I actually can show you how you can change that. But here's more of the information from the optical containers, and I'm taking this off of the web page. So here's the command where I said, okay, take my RMS02, and in my case I said this is basically 10,000 megabytes. And after you do that, you got to vary it off, vary it on, and then when I go look at it, there's my 7 images, and I go in and I say work with a volume, and I can reinitialize it, and that's where I can give it a name. And when I get done, there's all my different images, and then I decide which image I want to mount. And obviously, people that do a lot more command running scripts and commands on IBM I have their backups where you could tell it to go load based on the day. And once I mount one, then I could say save objects. And in my case, I just said, hey, let's just save changed objects. And it's going to go to opvert02, which had mounted my Friday. And so if I go into the Friday and if I go into my optical, it's going to show me the actual cartridge that I initialized, and then the object being the one that's mounted in that. And here is where I did some QGPL, etc. And that's where, if you're a small customer or your business partner with a small customer and they don't back up a lot of data, these new RDX devices with these 2 terabyte cartridges, you might be able to just mount in one and do incremental backups, but just mount a different directory on the RDX drive. And so if I'm looking at econfig now, there's a couple of things you can do. Here's the internal one that mounts right into the side of the 914 or the 924. Now, when you do that, you limit yourself to 12 bays instead of 18. But if you're a customer with IBMI and you're using PO5, you can only use 10 anyway. And here's the pricing of that. This is just list price. And so the price of the removable cartridge is $600 for a 2 terabyte, and let's see, $370 for the internal bay. This is the unit that goes in it, and obviously you can continue to do it. Here's the if you really wanted that USB drive, DVD drive there. Okay, I lied. It's 9 instead of 95. Now, some people say, well, I want to do my DVD and I want an RDX, but I don't want to use up the space in my system. Well, we also have a 1U multimedia enclosure, which can do both a DVD USB sled and a RDX drive in there. Now, this is list price, but this would go all in 1U, and it would have 2 USB connectors that I could plug into the front or the back of my power system. So here's a lot of other information on IBMI, some other links, and oops, hit the wrong way. That's all I've got for presentations. I'm going to come back here, and Joe, let's bring in some of the questions here. And where are we at? I'm at the top of the hour, so we still got time.
Yep, we got plenty of time, Bob, so we can go through the questions and see which ones we can answer yet.
So let's look at this. Can this be used as a backup for IBMI data? Absolutely. You can back up to a USB key, a flash, or a RDX. I would just tell you that just be careful if you're gonna back up to a USB key and you're going to count on it to work forever. The media, it's just not as stout as your traditional RDX drive. What is really inside of an RDX drive? A spinning disk that's secured and encrypted as it's writing. Okay. Does the image catalog get copied to the disk? I think I answered that. It's all automatic. The catalog, the image catalog is created when you plug it in, both from the RDX drive and the USB flash drive. It just creates and mounts the virtual optical. P9, okay, we talked about that. We talked about the NLS. When I format the key using the tool, it says there's 0 space available. You want to use the 1.3.0 tool, which I believe is the latest. At least it was when I downloaded it. And depending on the size of your key, the tool is designed to take the 2 or 3 gig that it needs and then extend out to the end of the key and create that as free space. So if I went and looked at my key while we're in here, and so there's my F drive, and so it's still got 6.8 gig left. it just takes it out to what's ever left. If it's not doing that, it's either a problem with the key or it's I'm not quite sure, because it should do that. It's done that on all the keys I've used, even cheap USB 2 keys that I've played with, but I don't recommend. I have tagged the Figer as alternate device. It still boots from the USB stick on the initial install. The only thing I think it can do in that is the overall change that we made for Power 9 support is trumping the HMC. I was told it wasn't supposed to do that, that it was supposed to do whatever you told it to do in tagging of the HMC, but that might be something that I need to check back with development. If you believe that's an issue, I would open a support call, but I can ask development. Okay, can you? I would be very careful of sticking in 2 USB keys at the same time with 2 different levels, just because there's no way to 100% say which one it's going to do the boot off of, because we don't tag down to the USB port level. I do know that we search for the one in the front and then the one in the back. But is that 100% foolproof? I'm going to say no. Requested to use the boot from the USB key with vSCSI map is only going to work with RDX. Can it work? Yes. Will it work religiously and always? No.
Hey, Bob, I got a question for you.
Sure.
When you stick the USB key in, can you close the door, the front door?
The USB key in the front door of what?
So when you have the USB key put in the front USB port of the server, and you have it in a rack, can you close the front door of the rack?
There is no really front door on the rack. The key goes right through the bezel.
I'm talking about the rack, not the server, of the rack
the
server is
rack
installed
itself?
in. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's enough room. I don't have any doors on our racks. It's going to be close, depending on which door they've got.
Or how long of a USB key you buy.
Yep, and yes, how long of a USB key you buy. You can buy some really small ones. So this pretty much replacing image catalog. No, it's another alternative. Image catalogs do a lot of other things for customers. It's been around. When you have multiple LPARs, you may still do it that way. It doesn't replace it. I think it gives you another option. Typically, image catalogs are used by customers that have many LPARs. This really is to pick up the slack or the replacement of no built-in DVD drive. Do you need to verify image PTF? I've never had to do a very image catalog. I've never done that command in my testing. Would it work against this? I think it would. Here's it says 0 space. I think some of these are repeating. Can VIO virtualize the USB port? Yes, it can, but it's limited on what actually it can do vSCSI with, which is RDX only. What version of Turo are you using? 1.3. I will double check. Let me go to I just need to bring up my directory I ran it from. I was using the 1.3.0.0.jar file. I don't know if there's a later version, but at least that or later, I would expect you should not have any problems with. Okay, let's see. Talked about that one. I think this thing the standard issue USB that comes with a rack allows the cap. Okay, so that's good. Thank you, Patricia. When you configure containers on a USB key and you use them for backup, can you actually boot from a Go? You're gonna have to, if you have multiple backups on there in different directories, you are going to have to help it out, either by booting a LIC or a different USB key that just has the image of the LIC on it, because you're going to have to be able to mount it into there, because your save sys is going to have its version of LIC inside of it. But I would caution you on configuring a bunch of containers on a USB key. Would it work? Yes. Would it work when you absolutely needed it? It's really going to depend on, I've got some keys that I've spent $10 on, and I've got some keys that I spent more than IBM wanted me to spend, several $100s. And I can tell you the several $100 ones work rock solid. I've had some of the $10 ones just decide to quit. Are there any minimum firmware requirements for Power 7 and Power 8? It's going to be whatever is required for that particular version of IBM I that you're trying to run on the box. Does BRMS support USB keys? I believe the answer is yes, but it's really going to support the RMS device. But keep in mind that there's no library like you would get in a tape library. Yes, there's containers, and I have not tried that with this, but I don't know of any reason why it wouldn't work. Can you load into a standard image catalog with the USB device? You can actually use a USB drive to actually populate an image catalog, or actually have an image catalog point to a USB key. And I think that's some of the stuff that they've documented out on the Knowledge Center, and it might be a good point to, Joe, I'm going to bring up a website. I'll be right back.
Okay.
I want to go to the Knowledge Center.
So it sounds to me, Bob, like for an IBM I system that you're configuring, you really want to have that RMX device.
RDX device?
RDX device as part of that configuration.
If you're small enough that you believe that it will fit, that is perfect for your backup. And then the combination of a USB key, it works good. I'm still running into customers that are ordering the USB DVD. They're trying them both. There's still customers that have older LTOs drives or LTO tapes, so they're putting in a SAS adapter to do an external drive as well. But if you look on my screen now, Joe, do you see the website up here?
Yeah, it's up there.
Depending on where you go, there's a lot of information out here on all this different things, optical containers, using containers. There's a wealth of knowledge out here that I would encourage you to go visit as well. And any more questions? I think we've hit a lot of them, Joe.
Yeah, I think we have. Let's see, I'm just looking through here. There was one about encryption. Did you say anything about that yet?
As far as encryption, you would have to do software encryption, where I believe, I'm not an encryption expert, but I believe there is the ability to do software encryption as it writes it out. I'm not 100% sure, but I can tell you on the RDX drive, when you cannot plug that RDX cartridge into anything but an RDX carrier that is able to actually read it. So it basically is encrypting it on the RDX drive. it doesn't really use a key. I know I can take that cartridge and device and move it from one system to the other, but you can't physically take it, let's say, and plug it into my Windows environment and be able to see it. It will not allow you to get access to it.
Okay. So one other thing, Bob, I don't remember who I was talking to about this, but they were talking about the USB keys in the data centers and how some data centers simply won't allow a USB key in the data center because it's too easy to plug it in and suck information off, right?
Absolutely. Yep. And I've heard that.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm not sure what we say about that.
Well, I think, and we've run into this too with the no CD-ROM, and they want a CD-ROM. And what I've found is the customers that I call it, I don't want things plugged into my machine and cables. And so they don't like, okay, I can't keep my DVD plugged into the front because we don't allow that. I have to plug the DVD into the back. How are you going to support that, IBM? And the answer to that is, then you need a powered DVD that we would support. And that's really using the 7226, Joe, where we would say, okay, then you need to go down this path. And the cables would be hidden in the back. Will that suffice with everybody? No, this doesn't address the USB flash. Right. Now, there was talk early on that we were going to embed one inside of the box, and that didn't go anywhere. And I think the customers that are like that really need to be in HMC managed environments, because then you completely rely on BIOS to help you install it.
And you don't need to use the USB key then.
Yep, and you don't need to use the USB keys. Now, for the people that do VIOS, I'll tell you one of the things that I've done is I've created distribution images. And if you've never seen a distribution image, you can actually do Go License Program option, it's either 40 or 41, and you can actually save your whole system in LPPs and save it to a single huge file controlled by VIOS. And what it looks like, and I'll show you it because I download them to my PC once in a while, is a file like this. Here's my 7.3 image. So I created a 22 gigabyte file and I mounted it as a virtual optical or OPT01 on one of my systems, and I did a distribution save, which has your LIC, all your license programs, everything, and I can boot that and do a full install of another LPAR. Hopefully that made sense, but that's the other thing that you can do in a VIOS environment as well.
Okay, yeah. Okay, and so I think that was one of the questions, was using the VIOS, plugging it in and doing multiple partitions with that.
Yeah, and you're with other than an RDX, they're not going to have it's really not supported with flash.
Okay.
And the reason is they don't know what they're going to run into with the key. An RDX device, they know what it is.
Yep. So there was a question, Bob, I don't know if you did this or not when I was off doing something else, but can you, the question is, can you show us how to point this IBM I VM over to LDAP KRB for authentication? Is that, not sure if that fits in here. Did I lose you, Bob?
No, I'm here. I accidentally hit I was trying to find the question.
Oh, okay.
Because I'm not really sure how LDAP is going to play into this.
Okay.
Can you show us how to point this IBM I?
So Alan says it is way off topic. So maybe we
Yeah,
need to handle that separately.
Nope, I don't know how to do. That's
Okay, so
not in
Sean,
my bailiwick.
all right, so I'm just going through the questions now and make sure we kind of got most all of them. Okay. Yeah, Alan later. Okay, well, I think we at
Okay.
least touched on them in one way or another, Bob. So
All
is
right.
that
Sounds
all?
good.
That's all you have for charts and stuff then, right?
Yep. I think we're
Perfect.
good. And thank you, everybody. And thank you for your business in the past and hopefully your business in the future. Everybody have a great day.
Yep. And thank you, Bob, for putting this together for us. It was fantastic education. And I already had people asking, can we see some other stuff like this? So I appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Yep. Okay.
Okay, everybody have a good month. And next week, webinar also next Thursday, a week from today, we're going to talk about, what are we going to talk about? Oh, Power SC. So some security and compliance stuff. And Stephen Dominguez is going to be with us for that. So another 2 webinar month. So I hope you can make that. With that, have a good week. Bye, everybody.